Welcome to another episode of Expected Buffalo, the podcast, brought to you by One Pie Pizza in Seneca Street in West Seneca. Open Monday through Friday from 9 to 8. Check out One Pie Pizza at onepiepizza.com. Here we are on a Tuesday, not messing up, but changing up the schedule this week. We had the Sabres game yesterday that went a little bit late with the Zamboni hitting the door. So I figured we would just hold on that. And then we're here today because there'll be no podcast tomorrow or Thursday for that matter this week. Because after tomorrow, I will be on a flight very early Thursday morning to head to Fort Worth, Texas, to be a part of the Steak Cooking World Championships with my buddies at Paradise City Barbecue. So busy week for me the rest of the week. A little break from the Sabre stuff. I'll still have an eye on them in the games, but getting my first-hand glimpse and exposure of World Championship steak cooking. I am not the cooker. I am the helper. So by no means am I saying that I am good at doing that. But it's a pretty fun experience. Learn, and then Fort Worth, can't complain. Nice area, nice city. So that'll be good for the rest of the week. But that is why we are here on a Tuesday. Now, the good news is, for being here on a Tuesday, we have a lot to talk about. Not only are we going to get into what happened last week at the trade deadline with the Sabres and the moves that they made, but we had some headlines this morning that I think will drive us into a broader conversation off of the deadline and into what this means moving forward, the front office, make or break year next year, and all of the good stuff in and around that, and of course the Dahlin rumors themselves. All right, so before we get into the Dahlin stuff, let's start with the deadline itself, because really this is the first time I've written a couple articles, but this is the first time that I've had an opportunity to speak my actual thoughts on that. So we had three moves. We had three trades overall, and we had two signings. Jordan Greenway and Jason Sucker, as you know, have been retained and re-signed. And then with the Josh Norris and Dylan Cousins trade with other pieces in that. And then we had Henry Jokiharju to Boston, and we had Eric Brandstrom in exchange for Nicholas Aube-Kubel, which pretty much goes as an AHL trade. Obviously, we'll spend the most of our time here talking about the big move. We have Cousins on the way out. Is on the way. He's already played 2 games with the Senators. But that is, when I talked about when I had the podcast before the deadline itself, it seemed like that there wasn't really a ton going on with a lot of those guys. The Byrams, the Cousins, and so on. This Ottawa move really came out of nowhere. It's even when I got tipped off on it in the morning and I started digging into it, I thought I would run into a dead end. Like, Ottawa, really? That's the team? There was no connection, no nothing. Really came out of nowhere, but that's the move. The rare in-division swapping of struggling assets, you could say. But, prized, maybe, I don't know if that's the right word, but, some value in the league nonetheless. It wasn't just put 2 no-name guys. And like I said, there's Bernard Docker and Gilbert went the other way in the draft pick, and there's other pieces to that too. But Josh Norris and Dylan Cousins were the 2 main pieces. So on that, as I was saying, on one hand, I was surprised that got done when it got done, and I was surprised that it was Ottawa. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised that Cousins was ultimately moved. There's been a lot of smoke if you go back to the Vancouver and the Pettersson thing. Before that, there was the Detroit Red Wings move that was pretty close to happening. There was connections to Nashville and Calgary. So it was pretty evident that he was out there, and the Sabres were looking to move him. Whether they tell you they were actively trying or not, I think it's just semantics of using words. They identified him, I believe, as one of the first pieces that they wanted to move out of this core and to shake things up. And there's nothing wrong with that decision. Clearly, it wasn't working here for him. It felt like, honestly, like we've talked before, that it was getting worse every single game. So, he gets a new opportunity in Ottawa, and he scored the game-winning goal the other night, so good for him. And then, Norris, I would say, wasn't overly impressive in his first 2, maybe a game and a half. But I feel like he really started to come on a little bit more as the game went along against Edmonton, and then he made the nice play on Bouchard to get the puck to Tage for him to get the game winner in that one. Ultimately, they think this is a move that's probably going to work out for both teams. I've said it a couple times that I think in the right situation with the right coaching staff around him in the right situation, that Dylan Cousins can rebound a little bit. Is he ever going to be the player that he was a couple years ago? I don't think so. But I certainly think there's a better hockey player in there than what we've seen. I think he has the skill set. I think when he's focused on the game, and as long as he has the confidence, I think he's going to be a player that can help Ottawa. Now, on the Sabres side of things, I think they got themselves a good player as well. As long as he can stay healthy in Josh Norris. I think that's ultimately the big thing here is the health. The multiple the shoulder surgeries, it's definitely a concern, and it's something that has to be considered and that has to be thought about when evaluating this trade overall. But as long as he can stay healthy, and I think we're seeing a little bit of that, definitely come through in the second half of the Edmonton game is probably when you see it the most. Is there's a player there, and I think there's a different type of player there, and I think that's a good thing to identify. That's what they wanted. You're not getting the transition offensive up the ice guy here. I think with Josh Norris, you're getting more of a two-way player, guy who's pretty good in the defensive zone, who can kill penalties, he can play in the power play, you can utilize him in multiple situations, and I think that allows Lindy Ruff to have a more spread out lineup, I guess is the right way to put it, to be able to utilize him in different situations. I do want to talk about the lineup here at some point, maybe near the end, because that's a little bit confusing where we are right now, but we'll save that for the end. But overall, like I said, I think at the end of the day, this is something that's going to work out for both teams to a degree. We'll see what degree that is. Whether it's more for one or the other, we'll find out. We'll definitely, it seems we'll get, at least for a little bit here, we're going to get daily updates on how the two players are doing from each side. So that can get annoying, but that's the kind of the way it goes when you make a trade of this significance. At least in the early going, you follow along, and then eventually one forgets and kind of goes about their day. I don't think there's really anything else I want to add on that one. There really hasn't already been said. Both guys have already played 2 games. Like, it just happened yesterday. So a lot of the stuff I've written and tweeted about and talked about. So I don't need to continue to hash on that. Quickly on the other 2 moves, Yoki Hari was whatever. He said he requested a trade. They honored it, moved him to Boston. I think getting a mid-round pick for rental that requested a trade that isn't playing well isn't that bad, but it's a 4th-round pick and is what it is. The Brandstrom one, to me, is interesting for a few reasons. One, I think he's a nice depth piece. If they wanted to keep him beyond this year and have him, there can be up and down in the AHL, NHL. He's definitely, I think, at this point at 25 years old, most likely, the NHL, AHL tweener. His in public models, his numbers are pretty good from an underlying standpoint and a nice impact. But for some reason, he just can't stick around, and there's got to be something for that. I'm not here to question that. It's been multiple teams now, and he hasn't found a sticking point yet. So there's no reason for me to question if there's not something there that prevents him from being a full-time NHL player. But I do think it's something that will help the Amerks moving forward in their Calder Cup, journey they're going to go on here as one of the better teams in the AHL. Kubel was playing well for the Amerks, but I think they have the offensive firepower where they could afford to move him, and then they get a little bit more experience on the blue line. They have some of that with what they have down there, and Prow and Rathbone and some of the other guys, but Brandstrom brings a little bit more of that too. Another nice puck moving defenseman. And probably the numbers were there, for Jason Carmanos and the analytics department that are heavily involved in running the Amerks. It's not really surprising that you would see that's the guy that they targeted to help improve their team as they move forward here with the playoffs approaching, as you could say. So a little bit, it's still about a month to go for that. But yeah, I was curious if they would give him an opportunity to in the NHL, kind of just play things out here with Gilbert going out the door. But he goes directly to the AHL, and helps the Emirates make the push there. All right, on the signings, not a lot really to add there. Greenway is going to be how many games you get a season. $4 million isn't, I think maybe a slight overpay, but I don't think that's that big of a deal. Zucker is the surprise one that keeps saying it's a surprise because really it is. It's kind of crazy to me that a player took less than what he's making now before hitting the open market and resigning. But that works out for the Sabres. Maybe it shows how much he wanted to be, in Buffalo still and stay here. So that's a check in the Sabres side that they have that player who wanted to be here, who was willing to take less to stay, and it's talked pretty glowingly about this team and the room and the guys that they have on the roster. So that's good for a team that's looking to rebuild credibility, and they need to do that in the open market with free agents, other players, the no trade clauses and the trade lists and all of that. I think having those two players as examples, maybe even being guys that can go out and talk to other veterans and try to help recruit guys, it's helpful. It's a nice feather in your cap for sure. Now to the news of the day. Is that the right way to put it? So this morning started a little bit chaotic with the comment from Paul Bissonnette and Spitting Chicklets that Rasmus Dahlin met with Kevyn Adams, and during that meeting indicated that if things were not going to change quickly, that he would be looking to move. So, as we later found out from Dahlin himself, that's not true. He never requested to be moved or even put an ultimatum out there. That was some information that I received as well that I put in my article, that there was never an ultimatum of any kind discussed. Now, I think we're in a situation here that we have to be careful, where we're dealing with two truths, maybe is the best way to put it. On one hand, no, Dahlin didn't put out a request that he wanted to be moved, and if the team didn't improve, and kind of an ultimatum like you have a year or you have how much over time, that never came up in the conversation. What I think did happen in this conversation is Adams and Dahlin sat down and did have a discussion about what the future of this team looks like. Where are they going? What is his vision? This year has been disappointing. Last year was disappointing. So you have 2 years of playoff expectations and you don't even get close to it. So what's going on? You just saw one of your core players leave. And, this meeting happened before that, but I think he wanted understanding. And I think as the leader of this team, as the best player on this team, that he has the right to ask those questions, and he should be asking those questions. Nobody should be happy with losing. Everybody in that room should be angry. Everybody in that room should be unhappy with the way things have gone this season. I expect Tage Thompson would have a similar conversation with Kevyn Adams, either already has or at the end of the season. Because these are, your key prime players that are committed and have committed to this organization, but it's time for the commitment to come back the other way. And what I mean by that is not only making the moves to put the players on the ice, I think it's commitment from other things around it. Whether it be financial, whether it be training stuff, whether it would really, all of those things inclusive. These players are smart. They see what happens here. They see what happens in other places. And when you're not winning, I think it's a snowball effect where all those other things outside of just your results on the ice start to really impact and play on people. Because if it's both, if you're winning, then, whatever, you kind of get over maybe some of the other things because you're getting wins and you're a playoff team and you're going to, and all of that good stuff. But when it's not, and then you don't have A, B, and C also in your favor, well, then, yeah, that's how you begin to build an unhappy hockey player that could get to a point, especially for one of the key guys, Dahlin and Tage in particular here in this conversation, could be asked to move or look for other opportunities or just start to be disgruntled. And this organization does not want to be there. And again, to be clear, we are not at that point in any regard. We're not at that point right now. And I don't think we need to stress or anything like that. And I think now that we've gotten the words from Dahlin, it's calmed down a little bit. But This morning it was a little bit shaky and a little, there were some kooky things going on out there. We're at a point here, and I think this is the main crux that spins off of the trade deadline itself into where we are now moving forward, because that is really what the conversation is. After the deadline passed, now they're not making a playoff push. They're not going to be in the playoffs. From this point on, it's what are we going to do to be a playoff team next year? And last year with Kevyn Adams in the front office and the hiring of Lindy Ruff, there was never a make it or make the playoffs or that this is it. What we have this year, I think, is going to be a different conversation. I think it seems that this year is going to be the year where the conversation with ownership is going to be make the playoffs or else. And let me tell you why it's different. Because you could be sitting there and going, well, why is it different from last year? Last year should have been that year because, for every 13 years, now we're going to be on 14 years. And I'll listen and look, I'm not going to debate any argument someone has, well, Adams shouldn't get one more year. I don't disagree necessarily. I don't know if he should get one more summer. But it seems as he is, and that's the situation. It seems when Lindy Ruff signed that contract for 2 years to be the head coach of this team, that Adams had ultimately 2 years to get this thing going in the right direction and to be a playoff team. Now, going into this offseason for Lindy Ruff and Kevyn Adams, they are both in a position now where if it does not work, if they do not start putting wins on the ice, the owner has no more financial connection to either of these guys. Their contracts are running out, thus making it easier for him to move on without any financial strings attached. And that is why I think it's going to become a conversation of if you do not get this team into the playoffs, if you do not put a winning product on the ice, then this is it. And that's why the article I put together today, we have reached the breaking point of the Kevyn Adams era. This is it. This is it. This is your final summer. This is your final chance. You've had 5 years to this point. You only got close one time. And I'm curious how Adams is going to work within that, because he's a guy that has routinely preached patience, routinely preached building the team the right way, while in the midst of that, making the Middlestat trade, making this Cousins trade, making the McLeod trade that has worked out pretty well for them. He's made some nice moves, but I think that it's and we've talked about it before. It's always one short. It's not enough. Something falls short somewhere. Like, I get it. You have nice hits, and that's the frustrating part. Is most of the moves that you make, for the most part, you hit on, but you just have to go that extra mile. You have to go make that extra move, that final move, to take that chance. And maybe this Cousins thing is the sign that he's going to do that. We talked about learning from his mistakes and, all that and blah, blah, blah. And they only go so far, right? Like, okay, prove it. And that's the thing. Prove that you're going to treat things different. Prove that you've learned from your mistakes. Prove that you've learned from just sitting on things and not being overly aggressive is going to change. And you are going to go all out. There's no tomorrow for this team. Because what we really can't hear about in the offseason is restricted free agents next year, salary cap next year, growing prospect pool. Because I'll tell you what, it's not going to matter for Kevyn Adams. If he doesn't get this team where they need to be, that's going to be another general manager's problem, not his. So while, of course, while you're doing your job, you cannot lose sight of your future, because in your head, you're like, well, I'm going to be the general manager of this team because it's all going to work out. And you're going to still think that. But also there has to be a part of your brain that goes, well, this is it for me. And if it fails, then, well, it's going to be someone else's problem. So maybe you include that pick or that prospect that ideally you don't want to, but you know you have to do it to get your team to where it wants to be. Now, the other part of it, which somebody brought up in the chat here on YouTube, is the financial spending backing of the ownership. And I don't really have a good answer for that right now. I don't know. I've numerous times expressed the way I feel and how I think this team runs. And you can even say Adams has one hand tied to his side or behind his back. That's a thing to a degree. Whether we can debate the semantics of it, if it's way up here or if it's down here to this level, but there's something there. What I will say, I think, is something that you can maybe build confidence in is that he'll have all the tools necessary to go put a winning team on the ice. Is a few things. One, the Elias Pettersson trade. As I said, there was financial equipment to do that. That included, the heavy bonuses and that whole thing that's been broken down in Pettersson's contract before. There was the backing to go do that if something came along. I think Josh Norris is another example of a financial commitment because while his cap hit is $7.95 million, over the next 3 years of the contract, the Sabres actually owe him more cash than his cap hit. I believe they owed $9.5 million in cash next season and the year after. Then I think the year after that is $8.75 million. Maybe those numbers are off a little bit, but that's kind of what's in my head right now. So the next 3 to 4 years, they owe more cash than his cap hit. And that probably had to be a sign off from the owner. And, that's good that we're seeing that. So maybe we're starting to see a shift and things go the other way here. I think from a fan experience, too, we're going to enter phase 2 of what they're going to do to the arena this offseason. And I think that's going to help with the fan experience. If that's going to help show some more commitment and some, more investment into the team, into the arena. We had the roof and the scoreboard last year, and then we're going to get phase 2 this year. I have an idea of what that is, but I don't want to say it just in case I'm wrong on that. I might have my years mixed up, but we'll just say that phase 2 of the arena improvements is going to be coming this summer. And, that'll be nice for the fan experience. So I think when you have all of that, it's going to set up, it builds confidence. Does that 100% mean that there's going to be no restrictions whatsoever? No, I don't think so. I also think that Adams and Ruff have the flexibility this summer to make coaching staff changes if they do decide to do so, which honestly I'd be surprised if they don't make coaching staff changes. Nobody's told me they're going to do so. Just logically, you would think they're going to do that. And then because he's in front office moves, I don't know about subtractions, but maybe some additions. So we'll see. But regardless, I think that there's, some things to consider about having the financial backing of ownership as we move forward here into the offseason. I've said this for a couple of years now that if this project fails with Kevyn Adams, I don't know how. I don't know how it's a recovery point. You can bring another general manager in and things turn around quickly. But I think that there's if you get to a 15th year of missing the playoffs, it's just. I think you're going to lose. You've already lost a lot. And if you bring in somebody else who's going to want a fresh look, who's going to want to make changes to this core, significant changes, maybe at that point, maybe next year's the point where Dahlin and Tage get a little bit loud. If Adams is gone and this team is losing again, they go, look, I'm not doing this reset, rebuild, whatever you want to call it again. I'm 24, 26, 27 years old. I'm not doing it again. And I wouldn't blame either of them for that if it did get to that point. And maybe that's what today, I think ultimately, as I talked about, kind of wraps into is it's not really so much the Dahlin aspect of a false trade request or ultimatum. I think it's the ultimate realization of where the organization is at this point under Kevyn Adams. That we're in the final stages, essentially. If things turn around and you're a playoff team and they're a good team, then then we continue to go along here and we go on our way. But if not, then yeah, we're in last dance. Like it's put up or shut up time. It should have been put up or shut up time last summer or even the summer before that. But really, this is it. There's back against the wall. There's no more room. There's no more another year under contract at this point. Um, this is the time, and we'll see what that means going into the offseason. We'll see how aggressive he wants to be. There was a lot of conversations held. Um, I think a lot of their key players. Maybe that's kind of where we can end before we get a little bit into the lineup stuff I wanted to talk about at the very end of here. But there was the Paterka thing, which we talked about. I believe it was last time I did a podcast. I believe that was going on then, and the New York Rangers connection, which wasn't was again not a true thing. They never really got anywhere or got close with the Paterka trade. I think that's something they weren't doing right now, or they were very interested in. But it wouldn't surprise me in the summer if that changes. I think that it's going to be a fascinating contract discussion between the two of them. I think there's already sort of a digging in beginning. And maybe he's the guy that they use. And I know there's from the Sabres side, there's, and you can even see it. I mean, there's some things in his game that they don't love and, that they want to see him improve upon. And maybe it's not happening to the extent they want it to happen. But nonetheless, it's a guy who's playing in your first line. It's a guy who's productive. And, that can't be denied. But really, I think he's going to be a fascinating player to watch as we go into the summer and that whole, restricted free agency discussion and what they end up doing there with him. Bo Byram, I think, was another one that I think besides Cousins moving, I think he was the one, from what I understand, there was the most conversations around in terms. I don't think nothing ever got close, to be clear, but I think it was maybe the one guy they were more open on, getting feedback on what the market looked like, what the interest was, not just now, but maybe in the off season, beginning those conversations, planting those seeds. Not only that means that they wouldn't want to keep Byram. That's certainly a possibility that's on the table. But I think that it's a possibility that, they could see what we're all seeing. They could see him being away from Rasmus Dahlin and just not being as effective of a player as he was there. Now, I'll give him credit against the Oilers. I think he played a really good game. It was one of his better games in the last few games, even few weeks. And that was away from Dahlin. So, maybe if we start to see that, I think what we're doing here, and I've kind of wondered to myself, why would you break up that Dahlin and Byram thing? But I think in their minds, what they're seeing, and this is the time to do it, to test things out, try different things, because it's over, is trying to get a good grasp and idea if essentially Byram is just a Dahlin merchant. Or is there a possibility, if they keep him, that he can play on his own pair? Because if he just can only play with Dahlin, then there's no point. You don't need to pay him $7 million to play on Dahlin's pair. I can go get a guy for $4 million that'll be just fine. So I think maybe that's kind of what we're seeing playing out here, and based on those conversations, they're setting themselves up as we move forward here. Alex Tuch was another guy that nothing ever really got close on. There were a couple of teams that I'm aware of that made offers. They were pretty poor, to be honest. I think that those conversations will probably come back up in the summer. He has one more year left on his deal. I think, and it's tough there because, he's a heart and soul guy. He's a wants to be here guy. He's a stand up, part of the community that fans kind of latch onto. And I think it'd be difficult from a fan perspective to move him. Of course, what you get back might change that, and you forget about all those things and you go on your way. But even I think just from a straight PR perspective, might be difficult to move him, but that doesn't mean you can't do it or you don't do it from that aspect. If it makes sense from a hockey move, then that's what you go ahead and you do. So those are a few guys. Matthias Samuelsson, we'll see what happens with him in the offseason. It's another one. There wasn't a lot of interest on the trade market, nor I think a lot of conversations, but he's another key player, or core player, you could say, that could be on the market to move here. And then Jack Quinn's having his own issues there. We'll see what they do with him if they, believe he's going to bounce back. They look to cash in on that value there. There's a lot of guys I think that have their futures up in the air moving into the summer. And it should make for fun conversation and interesting to see how that all plays out. But yeah, we'll see. It's stuff down the road that we'll really dig our teeth into more. As we're watching teams in the playoffs, we'll be talking about if we should trade JJ Peterka or give him a bridge or a long-term extension. That's what we'll be talking about in April and May, while other teams are trying to win a Stanley Cup, because that's just the way things go around here. All right, so let's wrap it up at the end here, talking a little bit about the lines and what they look like right now. So I don't want to get too crazy into it because there's some players that are under the weather, of course. And maybe, where I'm going to start this with the top line is maybe this is a situation where we're seeing the head coach slowly work Yuri Kulik back into the lineup because he's missed the last few games being sick, and you just, you want to work him in. So you're going to put him where you put him. But in practice today, Kulik, Norris, and Tage were on a line. And I think for how this roster is set up, that is bananas to do that. You're arguably, I wouldn't say your three best centers, but you're taking three good centers or centers that have played well in this league and putting them all on one line. Not to mention you're taking three finishers, basically, while Kulik maybe has a little bit more playmaking upside in him than the other two. These are three guys that rely upon their shooting to be effective offensively. There's no playmaker there, and I think that is maybe where you'll get into some issues. Is you have three guys, you have one puck, and you have three guys who are a trigger man. Doesn't seem like a great fit there. And again, maybe this is just slowly working down Kulik in. We're going to put him here, and then we'll go from there. I think they're really whatever. It seems rough is going to keep Tage on the wing, and okay, fine, great. I think it's kind of silly, but if that's what he wants to do, fine. But putting Kulik on the wing, then it's like, well, what are we doing here? So Norris came in now. He's my new number one center. He made sense as my second line center. If I'm going to put Tage back at my first line center, and then or Kulik, and you have two top six centers, however you want to do it. But I think having Norris come in and then now he's going to be the guy, kind of okay. And then where does that set you up moving into the future? Because Ryan McLeod, I think he's had a great season from a production standpoint, from what you've asked him to do, what he's done defensively. I mean, the way he played against McDavid was fantastic the other night. And you have a good player there. But I think, again, asking him to be your second line center moving forward potentially, and that's risky. This is the conversation. I think we almost have this every single week. You're putting guys in positions that make it difficult to have success consistently. You're playing Norris maybe a little bit over his head. You're playing McLeod maybe a little bit over his head. Maybe Krebs is a little bit over his head. And we got Jordan Greenway, by the way, playing center last game. And by the way, that fourth line did not have a good game. So and again, I wonder if it's just maybe the illness and you got to despair. You got to push your minutes around how you can. And maybe that's what we're seeing here. But I really want to see over the next couple games, maybe it's not until next week, that we start to see this lineup get spread out a little bit. Take some of your key offensive players and make your lineup deeper. Don't cram it all. I mean, this feels like we're getting back to the conversation where we always had to have Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart play together. You're cramming your offensive skill set in the one line, and then maybe it's hurting the rest of your lineup and the depth of your lineup. And I understand, the Krebs line I thought looked pretty good against Edmonton, and that's fine. But I mean, really, as they're constructed, that's a glorified elevated fourth line. I mean, Jack Quinn's giving nothing offensively. Benson isn't at the point of his career where he's going to be consistent offensively. And Peyton Krebs is who Peyton Krebs is. You're not getting a lot of production out of there. So you're really asking a lot from your top line, and then from Tuck, McLeod, and Zucker. And a couple of those guys, really are better fits as third line players on a good team. So we'll see. We'll see where this goes over the next couple of days. And again, I think it's new pieces. You're trying to make it work. Maybe we get Bernard Docker in here too, and we start to see how that's going to look. Where they fit him in as probably a third pair defenseman. But yeah, I mean, at least we have some things here over the remaining 19 games to watch, to dissect. Luukkonen, I think, putting together 2 good performances is nice to see after his struggles coming out of the break and even leading into that. I think seeing him put together 2 performances is good. I would really like to see him kind of get on a roll here for these last 19 games. Finish strong. And, you haven't had the best season, and I get that, and that's okay. Finish strong. Give everybody, the hope here, belief that you can be the guy that can be relied on next season. And again, I don't think he's really going anywhere anyways, whether he struggles or not. But it's another hole that I don't want to have a conversation about in the summer. There's enough to go fix. I don't need to worry about Luukkonen being in conversation. We have to kick around. Well, is he the right one? Is he not the right one? Should they bring in a 1B? Is it Levi going to get a chance? I think, please don't do that. At least don't make him the number 1 goaltender. We're going to have to go into that whole conversation for the 3rd year in a row. Is Levi, is he a backup? Is he a 1B? Is he going to split time? Does that work? And blah, blah, blah. You've had that conversation 2 years in a row. I don't want to do it for a 3rd year. So finish strong. Give everyone some faith. Give everyone some belief that you'll be fine moving into next season. All right. I think that's it for now. Bill signed Joey Bosa. I saw it pop up my phone. So, for the Bills fans that are watching, I guess that's pretty cool. Another one of those. If you could stay healthy, that might work. So that's fun to kick around a well-known player. All right. So that's it for today and for this week. Like I said, so no show tomorrow, no mailbag Thursday. I will be traveling, and we will get back to our normal schedule next week of our Monday, Wednesday, Thursday podcast. That's kind of been a little bit off with the illness I was going through, and then now with me traveling here, and we'll get back into that. But also, before I leave, should mention, Expected Buffalo officially turns 5 years old tomorrow. It is the official launch date of making the site go live. So we had our new cool logo change. You can see that right now. It's earlier a couple days ago. And then we have a new fun, I want to say, I guess it is fun, but I don't know if we'll announce it this month, but we do have some expansion plans here coming up. We're still hashing those out. We're still finalizing that. But really, once we do, I think it's going to be an exciting opportunity, especially for fans. It's allowing us to open our umbrella, to reach more people, to maybe break up the content from a numbers perspective, to a prospect perspective, to a podcast video section, all of those things that we're considering as we go through the finalization and the discussion surrounding this expansion opportunity. But really, it's going to be fun. And like I've said in the promotion tweets I put out about the code we still have going, half off an annual membership on the site using the XB5 promo code for the rest of this month. Really, this is the time to get in. We're going through a lot of changes and a lot of good. There's been a lot of growth we've seen here over the last few years, and now we're looking to cash in on that and take it to another level. It's to move beyond just the numbers, if you will, of an analytics team, and that's how we look at things. And that's always going to be our corner bread and butter, right? That's not going away. But I think that there's an opportunity to reach a broader audience. And I think with this expansion opportunity, once we get it finalized and locked in, that we'll have that, and we'll be able to bring you more content and split up in ways that'll be easier for you to digest and go find what you're looking for exactly. And also hopefully get more voices in front of you. Not just Anthony, Eddie, and I, but bring other content creators for the Sabres that covered the team into the fold and mix too. So definitely get in now. I'm telling you, I promise. We're going places, and thank you to everybody who supported us over these 5 years. It's been crazy. I tell the story that I really, Anthony's the one who really made this happen and launch. And I definitely never thought we would ever get close to what we are right now and where we, are projecting to be in the next few years. So we couldn't do that without you podcast listeners, you subscribers, you people who interact with us on social media, whether it's there or not at times. We appreciate all of that. We appreciate that conversation. And really, that's what we're doing here. We're having conversation about a sports team that frustrates us all more times than not, and we all get through it together, and we, keep going through to the next day or to the next game or to the next off season, and keeping faith alive. All right. Well, everybody enjoy their night, and I will talk to you next week. All right. See ya.